So my video asking the question of who would replace Vladimir Putin was quite popular. So let's do the same for the other major power pseudo-dictator that we have to deal with, and that's Xi Jinping of China. Now the most intellectually honest answer to the question of who will succeed Xi Jinping as China's leader is pretty straightforward, and that is we really don't know. Xi's succession is the biggest known unknown in Chinese politics. We know that eventually it will happen, but we don't know how, when, or under what circumstances it will take place. We don't know if he will personally select his own successor, and even if he doesn't, we don't know how that leader would be chosen. This uncertainty has enormous global consequences. China is the world's second most powerful country. Xi controls its economy, its foreign policy, and its military. Whoever takes his place will inherit enormous influence. The next leader will shape China's stance on political control, market reforms, US-China relationships, and territorial disputes like Taiwan and others in the South China Sea. But without knowing the conditions of Xi's departure or the process that will replace him, it's difficult to predict the direction China will take. However, just because we lack clear answers doesn't mean we should ignore the question. In fact, given how little information we have, it's actually more important to analyze the clues we do have. By looking at Xi's political behavior, looking at the Chinese Communist Party's past leadership transitions, and the structure of China's political system, we can kind of begin to map out likely scenarios for the replacement of Xi Jinping. There are many ways Xi could leave office. He could retire voluntarily. He could face a leadership challenge from within the Chinese Communist Party. There could be a military coup. He could be forced out after a major political or economic crisis, or he could just simply die in office. Each of these possibilities leads to very different outcomes. But one thing is clear, as of right now, Xi is not in a hurry to name a successor, and he may not ever do so. And the reason is naming a successor would actually weaken Xi's current authority. The moment he publicly designates a replacement, he risks becoming a lame duck. The CCP's political elite would start shifting their loyalties, gradually undermining Xi's influence. Even if the successor were completely loyal to Xi, there would be suddenly two power centers within the party, one around Xi himself and one around his designated heir. That's a threat to his control. There's also a risk of political fractures. Xi's allies expect him to choose someone from within their ranks, but no matter who he picks, others will feel sidelined and frustrated. And that's because a chosen successor would start developing their own network of supporters, which would create an internal rivalry that could destabilize the entire Chinese Communist Party. And then there's Xi's personal legacy. Historically, retired Chinese leaders have wielded significant behind-the-scenes influence, but Xi has spent his entire rule centralizing power under his personal leadership away from these previous retired leaders. If Xi steps aside, his own creation undermines him, and he has to trust that his successor will protect his policies, shield his allies, and even more critically, ensure his own personal safety. That's a gamble that Xi doesn't seem to be willing to take at this point. So for now, he's holding on to power, keeping succession planning an open question. But let's do the thought experiment. If Xi were to be replaced, how would it happen, and who would take over? Well, there are three main possibilities. Xi handpicks a successor, there's a power struggle that erupts among the party elites after Xi's departure, or a compromise is made and a leader is chosen to maintain stability between the parties. In scenario number one, if Xi were to personally select his replacement, the most likely candidates would come from his inner circle, figures who have risen through the ranks during his leadership and proven their absolute loyalty to his vision. The strongest contender in this group is Li Qiang, who is China's current premier, and effectively the second in command. Now, Li Qiang has a strong history with Xi. He was Xi's right-hand man in the Zhejiang province and has loyalty that has been rewarded with unusually fast rises through the ranks. He was promoted to premier without ever serving as a vice premier, which is a break from the party's usual succession norms. There's a massive bureaucracy and a hierarchy within the Chinese Communist Party, and he seems to be skipping it. Chiang also oversaw the harsh Shanghai COVID lockdowns, which were wildly unpopular, but demonstrated that he would carry out Xi's policies no matter the cost. Li is the obvious choice if Xi does decide to anoint some sort of successor, but he's not the only one. There's also Cai Qi, who is another strong possibility because he's a longtime political ally of Xi and currently oversees the party ideology, one of the most influential roles in the entire Chinese government. There's also Ding Xiang, who is Xi's chief of staff, and he has been the center of the Chinese Communist Party's decision-making for years, though he lacks direct governing experience. There's also He Weidong, a top military leader who could emerge as a wildcard if the military gains influence in the transition process. But there's a common thread among all these candidates. None of them have their own independent power base away from Xi Jinping. And that's exactly what Xi would want in a successor, someone who can hold power but does not challenge his political legacy. If Xi doesn't choose a successor and leaves suddenly, whether due to health, internal resistance, or a crisis, there will be a power struggle, and that is scenario number 2. Unlike past Chinese regimes that have clear dynastic or institutionalized succession processes before the Chinese Communist Party, the current CCP relies on elite maneuvering, backroom deals, and political alliances to determine leadership transitions. And historically, these transitions have been really messy. Mao Zedong, who designated his successor, Hua Guofeng, was quickly outmaneuvered by Deng Xiaoping. Deng himself had to purge 2 of his own chosen successors before Jiang Zemin took power. Jiang's influence loomed over Hu Jintao's administration for years, so if Xi leaves unexpectedly, different factions within the party will compete for control. Now, if no single faction dominates, the party may be forced to choose a compromise leader, which is scenario number 3, and it is someone who is respected but lacks a strong independent power base. The 2 figures that would likely fit this role are Li Ji, who is China's anti-corruption chief and has party-wide credibility. Then there's Wang Huning, who is a powerful political theorist who has shaped China's ideology for 3 different leaders, including Jiang, Hu, and Xi, and is also quite popular amongst the youth in China. Both could be seen as temporary leaders, allowing time for the party to sort out its internal divisions. And then there's the wildcard scenario of a potential internal coup and the military takes over. If this happens, figures like He Weidong, who I spoke about earlier, and is the top leader from the military, could become some sort of a kingmaker or even become the leader himself. Right now, there's really no clear successor because Xi wants it that way. However, over the next decade, 3 key factors will shape China's leadership future. First, Xi's health and ability to govern will be crucial. At 71, Xi is 7 years younger than Donald Trump and appears healthy, but if his condition deteriorates, the need for a succession plan could become more urgent. Second, any kind of signs of internal dissent among party elites could put pressure on Xi to outline a transition, especially if factions within the Communist Party grow restless. Lastly, China's economic and geopolitical situation could accelerate leadership changes. If the country continues to face a severe financial crisis, widespread domestic unrest caused by unemployment in the youth, as well as a demographic crisis or escalating tensions with other global powers, the Chinese Communist Party may be forced to act sooner than expected. Nonetheless, as of this moment, it seems like Xi is probably going to rule for another decade or more. The problem is past Xi, China's leadership future remains uncertain, and that is concerning because the future leader of China will have a major global impact.